Hello and welcome to this video on public goods. In this video, we're going to look at what is meant by public good, distinguish between private and public goods, and then look at something called the free rider and valuation problem. So let's start off with what is meant by a private good. And the definition of a private good is one where consumption by one person results in the good not being available for consumption by another person. So essentially we're saying here that by using the good, consuming the good, you use it up. So an example might be a chocolate bar. That would be a private good because if I consume it, there is less available for you to consume. Another example would be a piece of land. If a company uses a piece of land for a theme park, that piece of land is not available for anyone else, so that we'd class that piece of land as a private good if it can be used up. Now in this video, we're going to be looking at a type of good that is known as a public good. And public goods have two important characteristics. The first one is that they are non-rival. Now this is important. Let's make sure we get this down in our notes. But they possess the characteristics of non-rivalry. And let's look at what that means. That means that if one person consumes, uses the good or service, it does not reduce the amount available for consumption by another person. So an example here would be in the background, this is a flood defense system, and if I live on the side of the flood defense system that is protected, by me using that service, it doesn't mean there's any less service available for anybody else. And so we describe that characteristic as being non-rivalry. The second characteristic that this type of good has is that it's non-excludable. And that means once we've produced the good or provided the good, it's very difficult, very difficult to exclude anyone from benefiting from it. So again, if we think of the example of flood defense, if I live on the other side of the flood defenses, once that good has been provided, it's very difficult to exclude anybody who lives behind the flood defense from the benefit of that service. So the two definitions or the two characteristics of public goods, non-rivalry, non-excludability. If a good has these characteristics, we would say it is a public good. So let's have a look at some examples here. We have a number of different products and services, and we're going to go around and see whether we think they're private goods or public goods. So let's look at this first one here in the top left-hand corner, a Sky box office production. So for example, like a movie or a boxing match that's being streamed just on this particular channel. Well, let's use our two characteristics. Is it non-rivalry? By me using it up, by watching the film, does that mean there's any less for anybody else to watch? No. So it possesses that characteristic of non-rivalry. What about non-excludability? Can we exclude people from watching this particular boxing match or football match or movie? Well, we can, because they have to pay to unlock it. So this, in the top left-hand corner, we would say is a private good because we can exclude people from the benefit. What about the pair of boots in the middle there? If I consume them, if I buy them, does that mean there's any less for anybody else? Well, in this case it does. So we would say that that is a private good. It can be used up. There's only a certain amount of them. What about the football ticket at the bottom? Well, again, if I buy this football ticket and I sit in that seat, there is less for other people to use. So we would say that this football ticket is a private good. Now let's have a look at some of the other ones. Street lighting in the top right-hand corner. If I use this service, if I enjoy the street being lit, does that mean there's any less for anyone else to use? No, I'm not kind of using up the service. Also, once they're in place and they're turned on, can we exclude anyone from the benefits? Can we prevent people from walking down the street? Probably not. So this meets both our characteristics, and we would say that street lighting is a public good. What about the army? By me being protected by the army, does that mean there's any less protection to anybody else? No. Can we exclude anyone from the benefits of the army protecting us? No. So the answer is no for both, and we would describe the army, that service, as a public good. A fireworks display. By me watching the fireworks display, is there any less for anyone else to watch? No. Can we exclude someone from watching a fireworks display? Well, it's very difficult. They can just look over the fence. So again, we would describe that as being a public good. In the bottom left-hand corner, the police service If they're investigating my case, does that mean there's any less police service available for other people? Well, potentially. And if the police do their job and lock up a criminal, perhaps, can we exclude anyone from the benefit of them doing that? Not really. So here it makes one criteria but not the other, and we would describe this as being a public good, but actually we would describe this as being a quasi-public good, which is what we're going to come on to now. Quasi-public goods are goods which may not perfectly possess both characteristics of a public good, i.e. non-excludability and non-rivalry. So these are goods that maybe have one characteristic but not the other. And again, it's likely that these public goods the free market will not provide enough of them. Let's go and illustrate an example of the problem with these public goods. So why is provision of a public good by the free market likely to lead to market failure? So let's use an example here of a lighthouse. We've got a lighthouse on the left-hand side. It sends out their light. Okay. Now, under a free market situation, we might have boats. Here's the first boat, and here's the second boat. And under a free market, these two boats are the buyers, and they would be paying a certain amount to the lighthouse, and the lighthouse in return would be the seller and provide that service. Now let's think about the lighthouse service and the characteristics. Is it non-rival, i.e. by boat 1 using up the service, does that mean there's less for boat 2? Well, no, the light comes out and they both, they're not using up the light. The second one, can we exclude someone from the benefit once it's been produced? Well, once the lighthouse is emitting the light, can we exclude boat 2 but allow boat 1 to use it? No. So this is a public good, and let's think about this. Now, if boat number 1 pays for the service and the lighthouse beams out its light, there is an incentive here for boat number 2 actually not to pay because they can still use the service. So there's a clear incentive for boat 2 to free ride on the payment of boat 1. Now, if you were the captain of boat 1, how would you react to boat 2 free riding on the money that you paid? You'd be very annoyed. And in future, you might say, well, why should I pay the lighthouse if boat 2 is just going to free ride on my payment? So I'm not going to pay either. And in that situation, if no one pays, do we get the lighthouse providing light? No, if no one's paying for it, it's not going to happen. So often for goods, we'll say that if it was left to the free market, the service wouldn't be provided because people can easily free ride off the payments of other people in society. And we call this problem not the easy rider problem, but the free rider problem. And a free rider is a person or an organization which receives the benefits that others have paid for without making any contribution themselves. And this is an important definition, so let's make sure that we have this one down in our notes. A free rider, someone who benefits, who doesn't contribute towards the service. And most public goods have this characteristic. There's a potential for people to free ride on the service because we can't exclude them, and also the service is not being used up. So what is the problem here? Well, if the provision of public goods, things like lighthouses and the police and the army, were left to the free market, there would be a market failure due to the free rider problem. It's impossible to prevent people from receiving the benefit of public good once it's been provided. So therefore, there's very little incentive to pay for that good or service to be produced. So free riders are people who receive the benefit but allow others to pay. So what might be other examples of public goods? You might want to pause the video and you can think of any more instances where there could be easy free riders and actually the service wouldn't be provided if it was left to the free market. Well, these would be examples: national defence systems, sewage and waste, lighthouse, national rail safety systems, the legal system, good air quality, street lighting, fire displays, flood descent systems. It's very difficult to exclude people from the benefit of this. It's not used up in the same way a private good is. Therefore, there's a problem potentially with free riders. Another problem is the valuation problem. Often the benefits associated with public goods and quasi-public goods are difficult to value. So what is the benefit to you of a good police force? What is the benefit to you of clean air? What is the benefit to you of a flood defense system? It's often quite difficult to value these. So it's difficult to price and difficult for consumers to actually know what would be a fair price to pay. And typically people undervalue the benefits associated with these goods and so don't pay as much as they should or value it as highly as they should, and therefore will get under provision of this particular good or service. So to kind of recap, the nature of public goods gives rise to the free rider and the valuation problem because we can't exclude people and it's not being used up. As a result, private buyers and sellers in the market will tend to underproduce the good or service when free riders are around, or maybe not produce the good or service at all. So if left to the free market, the socially desirable level of output would not be provided. And so the ultimate conclusion here is that there is a strong case, a very strong case, that for these types of goods, like flood defense and policing and the army, that the government should provide them directly through forcing taxpayers to pay tax so that individuals can't opt out. So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by a public good, the difference between private and public goods, and the free rider and valuation problem that lead to market failure. That's it. Thanks very much for listening.